Political Communication by Robert R. Monaghan. Korzybski explained how superficial use of language is an invitation to communication error and how words have intended meaning which are interpreted through another's sieve or interpretive style. In his autobiography of a theory, George A. Kelly acknowledges indebtedness to Korzybski and suggests further that the way we use language also shapes the development of our personalities. Superficial use of words not only leads to distortion, it can also erode the person. When cliches are repeatedly disseminated over the mass media, distortion and danger magnify. And subsequent social diffusion further distorts meanings as information is legitimized by the media and is relayed through social interactions. In a time of high speed information dissemination through electronic and social networks, the danger of shallow slogans can be multiplied exponentially. Some of the most serious contemporary cliches involve uses of words left and right and the associated designations of liberal and conservative. Meanings associated with these words provide a broad superordinal framework for interpreting important political, economic, and social events, candidates, speeches, debates, campaigns, issues, law, and the wide variety of social movements which are introduced on the public agenda. Sometimes it appears that the entire democratic process and our ability to reason and understand events depends upon a left right interpretive framework which is itself grounded in cliches. What kinds of assumptions are being made? Some speakers and reporters say that a conservative is a person who opposes aid for dependent children and education, resents poor people, and favors war. Or they suggest that a liberal is a person who favors welfare, fraud, and incompetent teachers, who wants to destroy the family and enjoys pornography. Page 417. What purpose is served by trying to identify food for the hungry or legalizing marijuana as a liberal cause, or military intervention or suppression of homosexuals as a conservative cause? We know that the meanings of words can change as people are motivated to use them differently. And public witch hunts have been conducted by associating people with the extreme negative implications of the words right and left. The terms right and left, conservative and liberal, are especially important to understand because they can embrace so much more than particular parties, issues, positions when they are broadly applied to the wide range of circumstances characterizing political ideologies. Construct theory has been previously employed as a method of inquiry and as a theoretical context for postulating transactional principles of communication. The broad ideological meanings of liberal and conservative, as defined by selective academic theorists, are interpreted and proposed as a framework for better understanding political communication. This model of political communication can be explored for interpretation of political information as a basis for discussion and debate and as a research model for testing. Conservative communication principles, historical patterns. The essence of conservatism is recovering the tradition of the civilization, and the conservative will tend to follow and maintain historical patterns which give rise to the present. The conservative does not, in fact, oppose change, but in the conservative view, new ideas and new ways of doing things do not belong to historical tradition and are not yet tested as tried and true or proven as demonstrably valid. The conservation of past patterns and historical conditions and institutions is rather the basis upon which the conservative is cautious and may at times seem to the liberal to resist change. The old ways have been proven to be valid for the past, and innovation must be proven in terms of historical patterns. Constitution replication. It is also on the basis of historical patterns that the conservative places so much emphasis on the constitution. These are the sources by which one can determine the validity of operations, procedures, and law. New law and new procedures must be tested in light of the foundation principles and standards of the Constitution. This does not mean that the conservative is rigidly opposed to ever writing new laws or establishing new procedures, but rather than the newly proposed must stand the test and standards of the old established principles. The conservative is committed to neither novelty and risk nor to familiarity but to the norm. It is on this basis that the conservative does not allow deviation from authority of law. The law is valid because it has been tested in terms of historical patterns and constitutional due process. Page 408. The conservative courtroom judge who dispenses tough penalties is not cruel or insensitive. A penalty imposed for violation of a specific law is grounded in the tried and true and tested historical pattern of the Constitution. For the particular law which has been violated has been previously tested in terms of Constitution. Non-intervention. The conservative opposes any form of government or outside intervention which intrudes upon his or her individual relationship with the other individuals, groups, or institutions. It is a hands-off policy grounded in the assumption that the communication process in which one is involved must be allowed. If the enterprising individual accumulates wealth, resources, or power through more competent competition, no outside group or state can intervene without violating this principle. Individuality. No two people are alike, and varieties of individuals offer resources which make communication possible. The conservative holds the underlying assumption of individuality. There are variations and differences among individuals and cultures and cross-national communication styles. Liberal ideology also has usually set itself against any subordination of the individual to the society, since society is conceived to be a set of individuals rather than the representation of some normative authority. If one emphasizes individuality, it follows that not all persons are equal. The conservative individuals, born as they are, with variations of talents, interests, propensities, competencies, and motivations, which are inherently unequal, will naturally form social systems in which some persons will rise to upper social and economic levels while others fall behind. The conservative may point out that the poor have always been with us and that they exist in all nations. This is not to imply that the conservative lack a sense of justice or lack conservation for those who are suffering. However, it may help explain how emphasis upon individuality can lead toward different directions of social class hierarchies, as implied in the current trickle down economic theory, and how the conservative view of human relationships may be understood in terms of its anchor in the principle of individuality and variety. Now there's a political communication model where under conservative we have historical patterns, constitutional replication, non-intervention and individuality, and under liberal we have permeability, predictive validity, change and interdependence. This is page number 419. Liberal communication principles. Liberalism also represents underlying principles just as conservatism does, only of course there are different principles and interpretations. Permeability. Liberalism refers to free persons who are favorable to progress or reform. The liberal seeks new facts and perspectives. Permeability is characterized by a flexibility, open endedness, and tentativeness of truth. The liberal regards all absolutes, imperatives, and final solutions with profound skepticism. As Miami University's professor Larry Leitner describes this Kellian notion, we are always out of date in our knowledge or understandings. Understanding is not defined as something established or known, but is rather defined as being the process in the process of unfolding. Permeability is anticipatory, and the liberal is always open to new visions of the future. This is not to suggest that the conservative is close to new information and alternative perspectives, or that the liberal is unable to settle on a decision, but rather that the liberal's orientation to the future encourages an attitude of open exploration. The direction of exploration may also suggest the assumption of humankind's inherent goodness. Predictive validity. While conservative weighs ideas and proposals in terms of proven past record, the liberal is inclined to experiment and test in relation to an anticipated future. While this does not suggest that liberals are academic scientists, testing in terms of future outcomes does suggest a scientific model. If a person is highly permeable, some basis for knowledge claims is needed, while the conservative rests validity upon proven past particles and traditions and the constitution. The liberal defines validity in terms of rationalistic purposes which lie in the future. Accordingly, the liberal is constantly seeking and questioning the investigating and discovering. Such tentativeness does not mean that the liberal ignores historical facts, but it does suggest that the liberal may be more willing than the conservative to review commitments which exist in tradition in terms of their future implications. Now, page number 420, change. Emphasis upon change is the natural outcome of the first two principles. For such readiness to admit new information and experimental inclinations leads naturally to innovation. Old meanings and old ways are discarded or modified as new meanings are continually realized. While the conservative is inclined to protect outside influence and maintain the past, the liberal is open to the new. The liberal assumes that policies which applied under past conditions may not be valid in the present, and the desired policy is one which is relevant and responsive to changing contemporary conditions and anticipated future needs. Interdependence. The liberal sees an interdependent balance between persons, groups, and nations. The liberal view emphasizes pluralism, the society as a whole, or what Beer calls the national idea. The liberal is not concerned about nature and wildlife and the environment ecology because he or she happens to be a jogger or a hiker. The liberals' concerns about environmental conditions and the poor people of the United States and the hungry of the world emerges out of an appreciation of how various parts of our natural world and human society connect and are ultimately dependent upon each other. Conclusions. When persons of different orientations are exposed to political information or approach each other in social dialogue, their respective views may be grounded in more than what is easily visible on the surface, especially in the midst of heated political controversies. We may neglect the fact that at least two great political ideologies exist and need consideration. If we are to find the best public policy alternatives, We must understand these two approaches to government and how they might work in our human society. Clarification can emerge only if we identify and discuss on the basis of the central principles that are at issue as a basis for participation in the democratic communication process. We do not have one group favoring a creative human society and the other trying to blow up the world. We do not have one cruel group who want poor children to suffer in starvation and another compassionate group who want to care for the children and feed them. We do not have one prejudiced group and another enlightened. We have two worthy perspectives of the great ideal about how members of a total society can best communicate with each other, and these two perspectives need to come together in the creative conflict of free and open political dialogue. For there is another transactional principle which integrates both liberal and conservative views. It is the choice of that alternative which is most likely to lead us toward what Kelly and his students call the great possibility, page number 421, for creative self expression and fulfillment. Political communication effectiveness is increased as both true foundations are known and as political dialogue is directed towards the maximum potentialities which exist or which might exist.